The penthouse was its usual sleek perfection, all glass walls and cold marble floors overlooking downtown Los Angeles. I could feel him before I heard him, Ricky Gonzalez, in his tailored suit, tattoos curling up his neck like dark warnings, eyes sharp enough to slice through steel. He was the kind of man whose footsteps carried consequences. I kept my head down, dusting the glass table. I thought maybe he wouldn't see it, but when he stepped into the room, I flinched. Just that, a tiny flinch, and everything changed. His voice came from behind me, calm in a way that made my blood freeze. It was the same tone I'd heard him use on the phone before issuing orders that made men disappear. "Who did this to you?" My fingers drifted to the small white bandage on my cheekbone. The skin beneath throbbed purple, swollen, accusing. My breath caught in my throat. "Nobody, sir," I whispered. I fell." It was a terrible lie. He heard it. He tasted it. He stepped toward me, and I stepped back. That tiny, instinctive retreat. I saw something shift in his eyes. Something dark. Something ancient. Like a predator realizing something of his had been harmed. One deliberate stride, and he was in front of me. His hand came up, warm and heavy, fingers curling around my chin. He tilted my face upward, forcing me to meet his stare. I'd seen those eyes cold, bored, furious, but never like this. Never focused entirely on me. "Don't lie to me," he murmured, voice low enough to rattle the air. His thumb brushed the edge of the bandage. The gentleness hurt more than the bruise itself. Possessive, threatening, intimate. "Nothing in my territory is nothing, Sally," he said. "That bruise wasn't an accident. Someone put their hands on you. Someone hurt what is mine." Mine. The word stole the breath from my lungs. At that moment, the room shifted. The city shifted. My entire life shifted. Because this small square of gauze on my face was about to trigger a war. A real one. The kind that leaves bodies on concrete and smoke in the air. This is the story of how a single bandage triggered a Mafia war. How a Maid became the weakness of Los Angeles' most dangerous man. And how one brutal reaction changed everything. Hello, beautiful family. If you appreciate the countless hours of research, writing, and production that went into bringing this story to life, the late nights crafting every scene, the dedication to quality storytelling, and the work that goes unseen, please consider subscribing. It's a small gesture that means the world to creators who pour their hearts into their craft. My name is Sally D. Kennedy, and for the last 7 months, I have lived my life in shades of gray. Not sadness, but absence. Absence of noise, of disturbance, of presence. My job cleaning the penthouse office of Ricky Gonzalez was a masterclass in controlled self-erasure. I was the ghost who dusted, the phantom who polished. I existed only to ensure my younger brother, Marco, could continue to exist safely outside of my sphere of danger. The debt I carried was stupid and crippling. It was tied to a promise I'd made and failed to keep owed to a local crew that, thankfully, hadn't yet connected my mundane existence to the high-rise glamour of Ricky's world. They only knew me as the maid from the inner city, the one with the younger sibling to protect. The penthouse itself was a temple of white marble and sheer glass soaring over downtown Los Angeles. It was a place where light and shadow played dangerous games. But the real danger was Ricky Gonzalez himself. He was the city's quiet warlord, managing Eastern European syndicates with a ruthless efficiency that was terrifying to witness, even from the periphery. He wore his power like his perfectly tailored suits, a beautiful, deadly shroud. And he wore the ink on his neck like a badge of ownership over his dark kingdom. I knew better than to ever disturb the air around him. Tonight, I was finishing up in his private office. The space was dominated by a massive mahogany desk and a view of the city that seemed to stretch into infinity. I felt the familiar ache under my skin, the remnant of the beating I'd taken 2 days ago, when Hector, the debt collector, decided I needed a reminder about my deadline. The injury was visible, despite my best attempts to hide it. I'd used foundation 3 shades too dark and a tiny, pathetic white bandage on my cheekbone, hoping it would look like a clumsy kitchen accident. The true injury, the deep purple bruise near my eye, was harder to conceal. The elevator chimed, and my heart seized. It was past midnight. Ricky was usually at some negotiation or securing a deal that would consolidate his power. He was never here during my late shift. He stepped out, sharp and immaculate, a storm of suppressed stress radiating off him. He walked straight into the office, his eyes fixed on some report, his energy entirely contained. I folded myself small, ready to slip out through the service door, trying to make the air between us flow without my presence. But he stopped. He didn't turn around completely. He just halted a few feet from me, close enough that I could smell the leather of his shoes and the expensive, smoky cologne he favored. The silence was heavier than usual. Then came the question that would change everything. Who gave you permission to wear that? I froze. He wasn't talking about my uniform. He was talking about the bandage, the ugly little patch of white that had dared to violate the aesthetic perfection of his office. I turned slowly, keeping my head bowed, hoping the lighting would be charitable. I fell, Mr. Gonzalez. It's nothing. My voice was a whisper, laced with the frantic edge of a lie. He moved then. Not fast, but with absolute purpose. His hand, heavy and warm, cupped my chin and tilted my head up, forcing my gaze to meet his. His dark eyes, usually cold and distant, were fixed entirely on the injured side of my face. The close proximity was terrifying, the air suddenly thick with his suppressed violence. Nothing in my territory is nothing, Sally, he stated, his accent slightly European, giving his words a hard edge. The fall was a lie. You know what I do to liars. I couldn't speak. I could only stare into the intensity of his gaze as his thumb gently, possessively, brushed the edge of the bandage. It was the most intimate and the most threatening touch I had ever experienced. His eyes narrowed as he examined the bruise more closely. I watched his expression shift from curiosity to recognition to something darker. This bruising, he said quietly, his voice taking on a clinical edge. It's not from a fall. The pattern is wrong. The pressure points are deliberate. Someone's fist did this. Someone who knew exactly how to hurt you without breaking bone. My breath caught. He was reading my injury like a map, tracing the violence back to its source with terrifying accuracy. Tell me his name. Now. His demand was absolute. I knew I couldn't lie again. The man who kills without flinching had just devoted his entire attention to a small injury on his maid's face. If I didn't give him a truth he could believe, I would be the liar he punished. It was Hector. I finally choked out. He works for a local crew. Ricky's eyes narrowed slightly, not in surprise but recognition. He knew the name, or at least the crew it belonged to. The words tumbled out as the dam of my invisibility shattered. He came for a debt. It's my fault. I signed something, a bad loan. He wanted the money, and he decided I needed a reminder. Please, Mr. Gonzalez, you can't get involved. It will only make things worse. Worse? His voice was dangerously soft. Worse than wearing the evidence of a man's disrespect in my own home? Someone put their hands on what is mine. He didn't mean me, he meant his territory, his air, his immaculate control. But the threat was directed at the person who had hurt me. He pulled out his phone, already typing a message. You told me he works for a local crew, he said, his fingers moving with lethal efficiency across the screen. Yes, but they're not. They're small time. Just loan sharks. Ricky's gaze lifted from his phone, hardening into stone. No such thing as small time in this city, Sally. Everyone answers to someone. Ricky's expression shifted from detached anger to a deep, dangerous fury as information came through on his phone. His jaw tightened with each passing second. Hector is protected, he said finally, his voice cold as winter. I know who protects him. He paused, then decisively completed the message on his phone. I have just instructed my men to neutralize Hector. Immediately. I don't care about the political cost. I felt the blood drain from my face. My small, desperate, secret conflict had just been thrown onto the nuclear negotiating table of the Los Angeles underworld. You can't do that, I cried, stepping back, terrified. You don't understand. His crew, they know about Marco. If you touch Hector, they will come for my brother. Please, Mr. Gonzalez, undo the call. He grabbed my arm, the one that wasn't bruised, and pulled me back towards the magnificent view of the city. You think they weren't already coming, Sally? You were only a matter of time. You were drowning, and you kept silent. I just threw the first punch. You belong to my protection now. The debt is settled. Before I could process the terrifying finality of his statement, his private line rang. The tone was coded. Urgent. Ricky answered, his conversation clipped and cold. He listened for only a minute, his jaw tightening with every word. When he hung up, he looked less like a businessman and more like a predator who had just smelled blood. The situation is no longer local, he stated, his voice devoid of any emotion. Hector's crew reports directly to one of the Wolf's lieutenants. The name hit me like a physical blow. The Wolf. Viktor Volkov. The rival European gang leader Ricky was desperately trying to forge a truce with. The man who controlled the docks and the illegal arms trade on the east side. Ricky, I whispered, using his first name for the first time. What have you done? I've triggered a war, he said simply. But he violated my territory. And now, he'll pay the price. His eyes found mine, and for a moment, I saw something beneath the cold exterior. Something raw and almost vulnerable. I've spent 15 years building this empire, he said quietly. Trading blood for control. Creating a monument to power that gave me everything except a reason to live in it. It's a cage, Sally. A beautiful, empty cage. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to an intimate murmur. Then you walk in, humming old soul songs, putting a bandage on your face, and suddenly this empty monument feels exposed. You made me see the bars. Suddenly, a loud, sharp rap came at the service door. A uniformed man, one of Ricky's private security detail, entered, his face grim. He held a small, dark velvet pouch, a message boss, left by an anonymous runner. Ricky took the pouch, opened it, and dumped the contents onto his desk. It was a silver necklace, but the pendant had been savagely cut in half. It was the other half of the symbol worn by one of the Wolf's men, a direct coded signal of war and retaliation. Ricky looked at the severed symbol, then back at my terrified face. His eyes were cold, but his hand found my chin again, forcing me to hold his dangerous gaze. You see this? He asked, his voice low and absolute. This is what happens when someone touches what is mine. Your injury has gone from a small, local crime to an act of war. You have no safe choice left, Sally. You stay with me now. I stood frozen in the opulent office, the scent of bergamot, blood, and fear thick in the air. The severed silver pendant on Ricky's desk was more than just a message. It was a detonation. You stay with me now, he repeated, his voice the command of a king. I finally found my voice, laced with panic. I can't. You don't get to decide that. You've made this worse. If the Wolf is involved, they'll trace everything back to me. They'll look for Marco. The mention of my brother jolted him. He hadn't forgotten Marco, but he'd underestimated the scale of the danger. They won't get near him, Ricky snarled. He grabbed a satchel from his closet and started stuffing stacks of clean cash into it. Get your brother. We're moving. Now. My safe house. I resisted. No, I want to keep him away from this. I want my simple life back. Your simple life was a graveyard, Sally, he retorted, his eyes flashing. You were dying slowly under a cheap bully's thumb. I just expedited the funeral. He dropped the satchel at my feet. Take it. You have 5 minutes to get Marco, or I send men to get him. And I promise you, they will be far less gentle. I ran. Within the hour, Marco and I were in the back of Ricky's sleek black SUV, surrounded by silent, enormous bodyguards, driving out of the city and into the canyon hills. Marco, 7 years old, was terrified but trying to be brave, clutching a worn copy of his favorite book. Ricky sat across from us, silent, watching the city lights retreat. The safe house was not what I expected. Not flashy, but built into the earth, a concrete bunker disguised as a luxury retreat. Inside, it was warm and quiet, feeling less like a fortress and more like a tomb designed for one. Why are we here, Mama? Marco whispered as I tucked him into an enormous bed in a guest room. It's like a special vacation, baby, I lied, stroking his hair. It's safer than our apartment. When I returned to the main living area, Ricky was waiting. He'd changed into dark clothes, his sleeves rolled to reveal muscled forearms and the sharp lines of his tattoos. He looked less like a boss and more like a warrior preparing for battle. The debt is cleared, he stated without preamble. Hector's crew received a message. They won't come near you again. The war, however, has begun. A war I never asked for, I said, the accusation sharp. He didn't flinch from my anger. Instead, he met it head-on. "I know," he said simply. "But the danger was always there, Sally. I just made it visible. And now I can fight it." The next evening, Ricky insisted on a proper dinner. Not the tense, silent meals I'd imagined, but something almost normal. He'd had his people prepare Marco's favorite foods, and the safe house dining room glowed with warm candlelight. Marco, initially shy, began to warm up when Ricky showed him his collection of rare antique maps spread across a side table. "This one," Ricky said, pointing to a faded map of the Mediterranean, "belonged to a sea captain who never lost a ship. See how he marked the safe harbors?" Marco leaned in, fascinated. "Did he ever get lost?" "Many times," Ricky replied, his voice surprisingly gentle. "But he always knew how to find his way back to safety. That's the real skill, not avoiding danger, but knowing where safety is." I watched this exchange from the doorway, my heart doing something complicated and painful. This dangerous man, this warlord who'd just declared war on a rival syndicate, was teaching my brother about navigation with the patience of a scholar. After Marco finally fell asleep, Ricky found me in the main room, staring out at the dark hills. "You're angry with me," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm terrified," I corrected. "There's a difference." He moved to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "When I was Marco's age," he began quietly, "my father was killed in a power struggle. My mother remarried quickly for protection, for survival. My stepfather wasn't cruel, but he was cold. Everything was about control, about never showing weakness." He paused, his reflection in the window showing a rare vulnerability. "I learned to make myself untouchable, built walls so high that nothing could reach me. And it worked. I survived. I thrived. But I was alone in my fortress." He turned to look at me directly. "You were supposed to be invisible, Sally. Just another face in my perfectly controlled world. But you hummed while you worked. You left little traces of humanity in the corners, a straightened picture frame, fresh flowers in the conference room. You made my cage feel like a prison." "I was just doing my job," I whispered. "No," he said firmly. "You were being real, and I haven't been real in 15 years. The honesty in his voice broke something in me. This wasn't the Mafia boss speaking, this was the man beneath the armor. "Your brutal reaction put us in danger," I said, but my voice had lost its edge. "My brutal reaction," he replied, "was the first honest thing I've done in years. Someone hurt you, and I couldn't tolerate it. Not because you're my employee, because you matter." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, he gently touched the edge of the bandage on my face. "Let me clean this properly," he murmured. "Please." I let him lead me to the bathroom. He retrieved a sterile medical kit, moving with the focused precision of someone who dealt with injuries often, though usually on others. He cleansed the wound, his fingers brushing my skin with unexpected gentleness. It was an act of intense, possessive care that broke through my defenses. "My grandmother," he said, his voice quiet. "She used to tell me that the strongest people are the ones who can protect themselves, but the bravest are the ones who can let others protect them. You don't need a maid to be brave," I whispered. "I don't see a maid," he countered, looking directly into my eyes. "I see someone who makes me want to be better, someone who makes me question every choice that led me to this life." I didn't pull away when he applied the clean gauze. I met his gaze and nodded. This small act of acceptance was the midpoint. I had chosen to let him see me, and in doing so, I had chosen the danger over the isolation. The moment shattered the next morning when his phone rang at dawn. Ricky answered, listened for 30 seconds, and his entire body went rigid. When he hung up, his face was carved from granite. "What happened?" I asked, already knowing it was bad. "The dragon's breath," he said flatly. "The wolf hit it." The Dragon's Breath was Ricky's most profitable, fully legitimate high-end restaurant, a symbol of his influence and his attempt to build something beyond the underworld. The attack wasn't fatal, but it was massive property damage and a public display of disrespect. The war was officially public. "He's not targeting my illegal operations," Ricky said, pacing like a caged tiger. "He's hitting my legitimate assets, trying to cripple the empire by destroying my public face." He came to me then, his demeanor shifting from the focused general to the possessive man I was beginning to know. I need to hit back. Hard. Before he thinks I'm weak. He stopped in front of me, his eyes searching mine. But before I do, you need to decide. This is your exit, Sally. I can have you and Marco on a private flight to anywhere tomorrow. New names, new money, new lives. You'll be safe. You'll be invisible again. He was giving me back the choice I thought he'd stolen. I looked at the window, not at the hills, but at the reflection of the man who saw me. He offered me safety and invisibility, the two things I'd always craved. But the last 48 hours of being seen, of being the cause of this terrifying storm, felt more alive than the last 7 years of quiet desperation. I'm not going back to invisible, I told him, the words tasting like metal and fire. If this war is because someone put their hands on me, then I need to be here to see it end. Relief, and something darker, something possessive and fierce, flooded his eyes. Good, he murmured, before his mouth found mine. The kiss was fierce, a demanding question, and an absolute answer. It tasted like possibility and danger, a bond forged in mutual risk. I gripped the collar of his shirt, drawing the darkness in. I was committing to the fire. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. Then we fight, he said. That night, Marco and I were packing a small bag in the guest room. I was talking about the plan that Ricky was organizing something major, and we needed to stay quiet when my brother stopped humming. I heard them, Mama, he whispered, his eyes wide with fear. I heard a car. Not Ricky's car. It was loud. I shushed him. But a cold dread coiled in my stomach. The safe house was secure. No one knew this location. I checked the window, pulling back the blind just an inch. Below, a nondescript black sedan was speeding away, its tires spitting gravel. I felt a sudden, profound emptiness in the room. I spun around. Marco, where is your book? Marco. He wasn't holding it. It was resting on the bed, but something else was missing. His most precious item, a cheap plastic toy soldier he never let out of his sight. I checked the closet, the bathroom, my heart pounding a terrifying rhythm. Then I saw it tucked onto the pillow where Marco had been sitting, a small black card with a silver wolf's head embossed on it, and a tiny note in crude handwriting. The boy is now leverage. Your war is over, Gonzalez. I went deaf with panic. They had found the safe house. They hadn't hit Ricky's assets, they had hit my only weakness. I ran to the main room, where Ricky was strapping a weapon to his back, a focused look of battle readiness on his face. What did you do? I screamed, throwing the note at his chest. Your brutal reaction put him in danger. I told you your world would destroy mine. He read the note, and his face, usually a mask of absolute control, cracked with a raw, brutal shock. The predator's rage was eclipsed by a flash of absolute terror. They took Marco, I whispered, tears finally blurring my vision. You made him a target. You promised protection. Ricky crushed the note in his hand. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw genuine fear cross his features. Not for himself, but for what he'd cost me. Sally, he growled, my name a painful sound. I will fix this. I swear to you, I will burn this city down to get him back. Words, I shouted. You gave me words about protection, about safety, and now my brother is in the hands of a monster because you couldn't control your pride. He grabbed my shoulders, not roughly, but with desperate intensity. You're right, he said, and the admission shocked me into silence. You were right about everything. My world is poison. My brutal reaction endangered the one person who mattered most to you. He released me, turning away, his hands clenched into fists. But I anticipated this, he said quietly. The wolf is predictable. He thinks in patterns, territory, leverage, power. He took Marco to force my submission. He turned back to me, and his eyes were burning with a cold, calculated fury. He doesn't know I've already placed trackers on every vehicle within 5 miles of this safe house. He doesn't know I have men inside his organization who've been waiting for the signal to move. Hope flickered in my chest, fragile and desperate. You have a plan? I've had a plan since the moment I made that first call, he said. I knew he'd come for you. For Marco. I've been 3 steps ahead the entire time. He moved to a concealed panel in the wall, revealing a bank of monitors showing live feeds from dozens of cameras. There, he said, pointing to a screen showing a warehouse on the east side. That's where they're holding him. I can have a team there in 15 minutes. Then go, I shouted. Why are you still here? Because, he said, turning to face me fully. I need you to understand what I'm about to do. I'm not going to negotiate. I'm not going to trade. I'm going to execute every man in that building who touched your brother. And when I'm done, the wolf will know that some things are not negotiable. The brutality of his statement should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a fierce, primal satisfaction. I'm coming with you, I said. No, I'm coming with you. My voice was iron. He's my brother. You don't get to do this without me. The warehouse loomed on the east side like a concrete tomb. Ricky's team moved with military precision. 6 men, heavily armed, silent as shadows. I was tucked between 2 bodyguards, wearing a bulletproof vest that felt both absurd and necessary. Ricky had tried one more time to make me stay in the vehicle. I'd refused. You want to see what your brutal reaction creates? I'd whispered. Then let me witness it. He'd stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. The entry was surgical. Ricky's men disabled the exterior guards without firing a shot, silenced weapons and practiced efficiency. We moved through the warehouse like ghosts, clearing rooms with terrifying speed. Then I heard Marco's voice, frightened but trying to be brave, coming from an office on the 2nd floor. Ricky held up a hand, signaling his team to hold position. He approached the door alone, his weapon drawn. I stayed close behind, my heart threatening to break through my ribs. He kicked the door open. Inside, Marco sat in a chair, his hands zip-tied, his face streaked with tears. 2 men guarded him, one I recognized from surveillance photos as the Wolf's lieutenant, Anton Volkov. The other was a foot soldier, nervous and young. Gonzalez, Anton said with a thin smile. Right on time. Victor said you'd come. He's prepared to negotiate. There is no negotiation, Ricky said, his voice dead calm. The boy for a complete withdrawal from... Ricky fired once. The foot soldier dropped. Anton's smile vanished. You just killed one of my men. That's the beginning, Ricky finished. He moved forward with predatory grace. You came into my territory. You touched what is mine. You took a child. Victor will. Victor will receive your body as my answer. Anton reached for his weapon. Ricky was faster. 2 shots. Center mass. Anton fell, shock frozen on his face. I ran to Marco, cutting through his restraints with a knife one of Ricky's men handed me. My brother collapsed into my arms, sobbing. It's okay, baby, I whispered, holding him tight. You're safe now. I've got you. Ricky approached slowly, holstering his weapon. He knelt down to Marco's level. Hey, kid, he said softly. Remember those maps I showed you? The ones about finding safe harbor? Marco nodded, hiccuping through his tears. You just survived a storm, Ricky continued. And you were brave. Your sister is proud of you. I'm proud of you. Marco looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. Are they going to come back? No, Ricky said with absolute certainty. I promise you. No one will ever take you again. As we left the warehouse, Ricky made one final call. I heard him speak in clipped Russian, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. When he hung up, he turned to me. That was Victor himself. I told him that his lieutenant is dead, and if he ever comes near you or Marco again, I will dismantle his entire organization, brick by brick. What did he say? I asked. He asked what you were to me, Ricky replied, his eyes intense. I told him you were everything. The war is over. Back in the penthouse, the silence was heavy but different. Not the silence of absence, but of transformation. Marco was asleep in a guest room, safely surrounded by guards Ricky had personally vetted. I found Ricky standing by the windows, looking out at the city he controlled. There was a small cut above his eyebrow from where debris had grazed him during the extraction. I approached with the medical kit. Sit, I ordered softly. He obeyed, a small smile playing at his lips. You're getting comfortable giving me orders. Someone has to, I replied, cleaning the wound. You take terrible care of yourself. His hand caught mine, stopping my movement. His eyes found mine. I chose you over the Empire tonight, he said quietly. Victor offered me a partnership, full control of the docks, expansion into 3 new territories. All I had to do was give you and Marco back to him. Prove that personal attachments don't control my decisions. My breath caught. I told him to burn the offer, Ricky continued. I told him you were the center now. The war was the consequence, not the cost. That was insane, I whispered. You could have lost everything. I had nothing, he corrected. Before you, this was just a monument to loneliness, power without purpose. You gave me something worth protecting beyond territory and reputation. He stood, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small box and opened it. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a single diamond that caught the city lights. This isn't about possession, he said. It's about partnership, about choosing to be visible together, in a life that's dangerous and real, and ours. He took my hand. Sally D. Kennedy, will you stop being invisible with me? I looked at the ring, at this man who had triggered a war over a bandage on my face, who had burned bridges with dangerous men to protect my brother, who had chosen love over empire. Yes, I said, tears streaming down my face. Yes. He slid the ring onto my finger, then pulled me into his arms. The kiss was different this time, not fierce or desperate, but certain. A promise sealed. 6 months later, the penthouse was transformed. Marco's drawings decorated the refrigerator. His school books sat on the coffee table. The sterile monument had become a home. I stood at the windows, wearing a sleek business suit. No more Maid's uniform. I was now Ricky's public-facing administrator, his partner in legitimate business ventures. The underworld knew me as untouchable, the woman for whom Ricky Gonzalez had declared war. My face bore no bandage. The bruises had healed, leaving no trace. Ricky joined me at the window, sliding an arm around my waist. Marco's teacher called, I said. He's top of his class in geography. Apparently he's been teaching the other kids about navigation and safe harbors. Ricky smiled. He learned from the best. I turned to face him. Do you ever regret it? The partnerships you lost, the territories you gave up. He cupped my face, his thumb tracing the place where the bandage once was. I traded an empire for a kingdom, he said. And you are my queen. Below us, the city glittered, dangerous, beautiful, ours. I was no longer invisible, no longer safe, no longer alone. I had traded the graveyard of anonymity for a life that was visible, precarious, and absolutely real. And I had never been more alive. If you believe that real love means protecting those who matter, no matter the cost, if you believe in loyalty, sacrifice, and choosing people over power, then subscribe. This is a channel for those who understand that the most beautiful things in life are worth fighting for. Thank you for watching.